And for those people who are trying to do that, who are taking that responsibility, when it comes to supplements, you know, it's hard to navigate because there's not what you're proposing, the naturally occurring standard. Because as they go through, there's claims of all natural, or that it's modeled after nature, that it's organic. I mean, you have a whole chapter talking about really how misleading all these terms are.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty simple. I wrote this book, and we edited it down to very user-friendly language. I mean, people that I know that read fairly well read this book in 2 hours. I know people that sit down and they, at 8 o'clock and they're done with it at 10 o'clock at night. So this is not a hard book to understand. I think it is a book that is almost mandatory for any person who's seriously interested in health to read, and not only for themselves, but to share this with those they love, those other fellow humans out there, because we've got to turn the stones on all of these deceptive things that are happening today. And if we really do not stand for integrity and truth, and if we do not live that through self-responsibility, well, then we're part of the problem today. We don't have or should not have the right to yell and complain about anything until we start to take charge of our lives again and become participatory members of the culture and society rather than victims sitting around being waited to be punched in another part of the body. And let me assure you that greed is the overwhelming reason all of this disorder is occurring. And when people do not have themselves, they need stuff. And people need more and more and more because they're not being fulfilled on the most basic levels. They're not being fulfilled in their family life. They're not being fulfilled in their work life. And they're getting sicker. And it's this big, big cycle of sickness that goes on. And so they start to make what's important in their life things that will never make them happy. And that's stuff. And I know that from my own personal background. When food became the way I indulged myself, since I didn't want to ever spend a minute looking at who I really was and all the BS that I talked about and all the time I wasted. I didn't want to see that, so I made food my narcotic. Others make food, drugs, alcohol, which is a drug. There's different vehicles we use. Some use sex, some use abuse, some use violence. And all of these are methods of diversionary processes, so that you don't have to look at who you are. And if you start to look at who you are as an individual and start to live a life of integrity, supplements are just as important as everything else, because once you have turned the stone and you know the truth that we've now talked about in this series, it is your obligation to live this way and to become an example for others.